Awesome. Well, just like we always do at OPN and the Supporters Fund and Ask an Angel, we'd like to jump right into things. So
let's do it.
Welcome to our podcast. Very excited to have you here today, Steve. I've been going through mountains of data, and I'm so excited to get to chat with you about a few things. And today, maybe the best way to start is if you can give us a little bit of an idea of your background, maybe a little bit about what you're doing today, because we're going to dive into that. And then, of course, the best question of all, one thing about you that no one will know.
Okay. Okay, my background. I've got a long time ago, Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Math and an MBA from Western. Always wanted to be an entrepreneur, though. And after about a 10-year stint in corporate, I stepped out as an entrepreneur and really haven't looked back since. I've a very short 18-month stint as part of my my entrepreneurial journey, I guess you'd call it. I started a consulting company, then merged with a couple of other consultants, then sold to a company. Then we exited from there and started a couple other companies after that. So mostly an entrepreneur all my life, although I will call it an old school entrepreneur. So I started the company with my one of my most recent companies with a line of credit on my house, and worked my ass off to get the cash flow break even as fast as I possibly could, so that I could then face my wife and tell her that everything was under control.
I love it. I love it. And one thing about you that we won't know?
A few people know this, but I'm a kiteboarder.
Cool. And where do you get to do that out of?
Usually down in Turks and Caicos.
Oh, okay.
I've been down there in a year and a half, so that's kind of disappointing, very disappointing. But I typically don't do it up here, although there's lots of places to do it up here. But we've got a cottage, and it's on a small lake that's not conducive to kiteboarding, and I've got other things that I enjoy in the summer. So that's where I do it.
Oh, that's pretty exciting. Well, I want to kind of go back to a little bit about what you shared, and I love that you're, as you called it, I guess, an old school entrepreneur, I guess. And I see that you spent a good amount of time learning the corporate world, being at Eddie Bauer for 10 years, which I think is a fantastic learning experience. And I'm sure there's got to be some good stories in there that occurred during that time. And maybe you got to meet some celebrities, who knows, but I know they're a pretty popular brand and always have been. So you're welcome to share any if that's the case, if you did get to meet any celebrities during that time.
No, not really, other than a few mountain climbers who are celebrities in their own right, but not to the general population for the most part.
Fair enough. Well, you did jump into starting off a few of your own ventures and then sold them. And I guess the first part of my curiosity is we'll start off with the old school part where you started this from scratch and you did a line of credit and you dropped it on your home. One, is that super uncommon now that entrepreneurs just really aren't taking that risk? I'm going to throw in a little bit of anecdotal information myself. When I started very similar with a credit card. And I set up a corporation, and the banks wouldn't give me more than a $500 credit card. So that's how I ran my company. And then after year one, I went back and said, okay, I need some more funding. They said, well, we'll move it to $1,000, but you need 2 years of data. And I was like, what the hell, 2 years? So then I worked another year and I went back and they said, this is great. We're going to move it up to 2,500. I was like, you guys are ridiculous. And then ever since then, they would always reach out and say, hey, we want to give you more credit. I said, I don't need your money, but thank you for not helping me when I did need it, because you drove me to figure out how to balance my business. And I'm now curious to see is, based on the experience you had, do you find that actually righted the ship and got you into a better position to be able to manage through and see how companies can actually really expand themselves and do this on their own without always having to go for outside capital? And obviously being an angel, you want to be able to bring capital in, what have you seen change in the landscape, and how much do you appreciate it differently, or what side do you kind of fit on in that sense?
Well, I appreciate the world's a lot different than when I started my businesses. I think my second last business was 1989 or something like that. So there were very few venture capitalists out there. I'm sure there were a few angel investors, but I don't think that term had even been coined back then. And so it was just the way you started a business. You just, you scratched together whatever kind of funding you could come up with, and you took a chance, and you knew that you were taking a chance, and so you worked your ass off. And I say I was lucky enough to own a good portion of my home, so I was able to get a line of credit and at least have a bit of a credit line to operate the business against. But knowing full well I had to come home and face my wife every night, so I had to make sure that I didn't dip too deep into that. So today, the world's a lot different. There's a lot more funding sources, angel investors and VCs, and even friends and family are I think more of a better funding source now than it certainly was back in my day. So it's just a different world, and I get that. I think there's still entrepreneurs out there that try to build the business all by themselves and own 100% of it. There's others that follow the playbook, the formula, and do extremely well at it. Going through multiple rounds of financing and reducing their share of the business, but not their share of the ultimate proceeds, because they're building the business faster than they're diluting their ownership. So, that's the way the game works in terms of a positive result. That's the dream everybody has. Of course, the other thing is, a lot of these entrepreneurs are, some of them are still in school or just come out of school or whatever. They don't have a home to get a line of credit against. So, and the banks are the same today. If you go with a great idea but no equity, no security, then they're not going to lend you any money either. So they haven't changed in that regard.
That's very true. Even when I had started with that credit card, and I pushed throughout time, but it was always around, I would tell everybody, make sure you have some assets. They're really important, especially if you do start a company. You need something to leverage, and assets, having an asset like a home or something, is a great way to start anything. And if you haven't got there, then that might not be the means at the time. You may have to find other ways to build up that idea. But I always looked at, you have to eat up enough risk to get other people just as interested in what you're doing. And it can be a little bit more stressful. And but at the end of the day, the great thing is that even though you had to come home to the wife and make sure she understood it, is that it was an equally balanced budget, that you were both striving to accomplish multiple things. But without that boss, maybe you would have went a little bit too far, and who knows what could have occurred. So I think having, and it goes to a couple of things that you talked about in some areas that you get into, but really being able to bring a lot of communication in and around the startup with the people that are invested in the startup, but even outside the startup, all of these make a big difference in helping you drive your business forward.
I have one other little anecdote to tell you along this lines before I'm sure you want to move on to more current things. But I actually, while I was at Eddie Bauer, I became friends of Tim Snellgrove, who was the owner of Timothy's Coffees of the World. And he and I got talking about starting a business together in direct marketing, essentially the predecessor of catalog marketing, the predecessor of e-commerce, for coffee and coffee products, et cetera. And he said, Steve, I want to do this, but I want you to invest some money in the business. And I said, why do you want me to do that, Tim? Because I'm bringing all the expertise. He said, I want you to come home at night, every night, and I want your wife to greet you at the door and ask you, honey, how was business today? And I want her to really mean it. So I've always remembered that when you've got some money at risk, the family's very invested in making sure that you're successful.
Ah, that's a great line. I completely agree with that. It ties everybody in, right? Makes everybody make a little bit more eager to get behind the opportunity or to share more information with their friends and help promote it and sell it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's great. And taking that experience that you had in taking from the Eddie Bauer and moving into your own ventures, you also kind of created your own venture firm and have had that for a long time. So how much of the experiences that you had early on really shaped the future for you getting in to be an entrepreneur and then you investing and starting to work with startups?
Well, it was a very natural progression. I mean, I really almost didn't know what was happening. As we became more successful, I had a partner in my final business, and as we became more successful, we'd stumble on an opportunity or two along the way where somebody had a great idea or what appeared to be a great idea, or at least they thought it was a great idea, and we'd take a look at it and potentially invest. And we actually invested in one idea that fell through, and so we ended up getting our money back out of that one, which was kind of fun, or funny. But then. My business partner, I was working my way out of our business, and he, through a friend of his, got looking at a company through GTRAN, through the Golden Triangle Angel Network, and suggested I should take a look at it. So I went down and took a look at it, and it looked interesting. So I invested a bit of money in it, and as a result, joined GTAN. And because at that time, FedDev had their IBI program, Investing in Business Innovation program, where they matched 50% of any angel funds that were invested in the company on an interest-free loan basis, which was a great way to leverage your investment. But you had to belong to a recognized angel group. So I joined GTAN and then thought, well, geez, I've spent this money to join this organization. I guess I should go down and find out what it's all about. And ended up meeting some fantastic people very, very quickly, seeing some other very interesting business opportunities very quickly. And that was back in, I think it was 2010. So the rest is history, as they say. So I've been at this for on a formal basis. Then I finally knew I was an angel investor. So I've been at it for about 10 years. Amazing.
And there is a lot of great people that I've also met, yourself included, over the last, I think, 5 years that I've been part of the GTAN side of things. But it's been amazing. There's so much knowledge all jammed into that room at one time, and everybody's sharing and working through screening and all of the other events. So it's pretty exciting, to say the least. So now you've spent 10 years working through all these different types of startups. They vary across all boards. I know that GTAN does focus a little bit more on more of the health tech, biotech space. And then there's a couple of other really prolific startup scenes that are kind of tied into that. What have you learned from that? Is there certain things that really drive you on the investment side? Did that shape your investment thesis? Did you start going more towards the areas that they liked? Or did you kind of keep it pretty broad?
I started out, my final business was we provided outsourced technology and marketing services with real strong focus on life and health insurance business. So my background knowledge was in sales, marketing, and technology, enterprise technology. So, and back when I joined GTAN, that was the major focus of GTAN, and really the major focus of startups. There was some med tech stuff going on, but not anywhere near as much as there is now. Of course, there's no AI and a bunch of these other streams of investment. So I could easily understand the business case for most enterprise technology plays. And so that was where I was most comfortable. But I invested in a few outliers, a couple of med tech companies, and only because they sounded really good conceptually in terms of what they're trying to solve. And B, I had a couple of co-investors, friends of mine from GTAN, who were very knowledgeable in the space. And therefore, I could trust their product knowledge and their expertise in that area. And I could look at the company, though, from other perspectives. And this is where, as you well know, JP, angel investing is where the best leverage is in angel investing, is when you invest alongside other people that have different areas of expertise that they can bring to the table in the due diligence process, and then in the process of advising and helping their companies going forward. You know, you're a technology guy, so I can rely on you in terms of your technology expertise. I've got more of a sales and marketing bent, so you can rely on me.
Oh, we lost your mic.
Oh,
nope, it's back now.
Back. Okay, I was waving my hands, so maybe I somehow blocked it. I don't know. So yeah, that's where the angel investing formula works extremely well from my perspective, both from a due diligence standpoint and then from helping the companies going forward, because there's a varied level of expertise that comes to the table.
And that's a really important point to make, is that when you do make investments, it's not about just you going in and walking away, that there's a lot of other people that get tied into this investment, and you do try to feed off of their experiences so that you can move quicker through due diligence, but also so that you can get through all this material, because there usually is quite a bit of it, so that everybody can get a good understanding. And usually the lead has a really strong background in the area, so they can help you move through, talk to the right people, and make those decisions. Maybe we can touch a little bit on Via Fora, because I think you've been with them for quite a bit of time. Maybe in that process, when you first started with them to where you are today, how did you find that shift went into it? Like, did you go in as an investor, then became part of the board, and how did that really structure out the learning that you could take and share that with the audience?
I invested, and part of what GTAN often does, if they're the lead investor in a round, they'll ask for a board seat. And when angel investors, as you well know, JP, when angel investors invest, it's often before most of these companies have a formal board. Their board is just a couple of founders, perhaps. Maybe if it's a single founder, it's them and maybe their wife or something like that. So, but they need to get a formal board in place quickly. I found this is kind of interesting in terms of, and again, you've probably seen this too, where you start talking to a company about potentially investing in them and talking about board and board structure, and they don't want to have any outside directors. They think the directors are going to come in and steal their company, and which is not the case. I've never seen that happen in my 10 plus years of doing this. But there's some that just have this fear that that's going to happen. Of course, that's the signal to walk away from the investment opportunity. So it's. It happens sometimes, but these companies need to have a properly structured board with someone that's going to make sure they're doing the proper governance and that sort of thing, so that then when they go to do their next investment round, the due diligence process is smooth and straightforward. There's no warts and or no significant warts that have to be cleaned up before an investor would invest in a company. At that particular stage. And in fact, if they haven't had good governance, in some cases that can create an investment deal, as you've probably seen too. So that's why they've got to have a good structured board. So anyway, that was a long way around to this story back to Via Fora. So we asked for a board seat, and we talked amongst the investors in the group, and I somehow drew the short straw.
You're hitting the mic or something. The mic's
okay. Better now.
Yeah, sorry, it's going up and down. So
yeah, okay. Yeah, I think I know what I'm doing now. Okay, I'm gonna keep my hands still. So anyway, I drew the short straw. But Bent and Leong joined the board as well. So there were two of us that joined the board, and I learned a lot. That was one of probably my first board, actually. And as you can see from my profile, I've been on a number of different boards. I'm on fewer now, as at some point in time, an angel investor has to hand the baton off to somebody else. Typically, companies don't want to grow their boards beyond five people for the most part from an efficiency standpoint. So angel investors hand off to VCs, and VCs hand off to other VCs, and on and on. And that's a good thing. And there's some downsides to that as well, which we may get to in our conversation through the rest of the hour. But so it was a good experience for me. I left the board via about maybe 2-3 years ago. So since then, they ran into some difficulties, as you may or may not know. Went through a bankruptcy, but are still very much alive and well right now. But it was it's hard work, though. I will say, for the most part. Sometimes you catch a real lucky rocket ship that you just kind of guide a little bit, and the company just happens to catch that rising star, and away it goes, and you get lucky, and away you go with it. In many cases, it's hard work. There's all kinds of things that entrepreneurs need that they don't have at the start. They don't know anything about, HR policies and legals and accounting policies and structures, and various and sundry other things that you've got to help them through. And so a board position is not a once every 3 months kind of gig for the most part with these companies. Again, as you know, you've got to roll up your sleeves and dig in. And particularly the chair of the board is the one that does probably more of the heavy lifting from that standpoint.
No, and I love that you brought all that up and shared that, because I do think a lot of founders may not have that understanding of what a board is and why it helps. But on the reverse side, I think a lot of investors don't realize what work needs to go in to help support a company from a governance standpoint, and the fiduciary responsibilities that come with running a board. And I find that a lot more of the investors that I interview, they all have the same qualms against the board and how it works, and what they're trying to get people to realize and better understand, because it plays such a significant role. And there are a few things that we'll dive into a second. But is there a time that you look for when making an investment in a company where you think they should be implementing a board? Is there a good timing that you think really works?
I think they should do it the first time they take any investment outside friends and family.
Done. Bingo, bingo. I was going to lights in action, but I completely agree with you. 100%. I'm liking this right now on the Facebook and everywhere else, but 100% agree with that. I think there's that fear. And you earlier mentioned the fear that people were going to take over their company and change the direction and change all of that. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how to ensure that feeling isn't there for the founder, and letting them kind of know that when you put a board together, the reason you're putting a board together is around governance, but there's a lot of other things that do tie into this, and one of them isn't about taking over your company.
Well, that's I'm not sure you can prepare them for it. I think they've got to be prepared for it themselves. I've never found that I've been able to convince, if someone's dead set against it, I've never been able to convince them otherwise. I've tried. to convince them and show them and give them examples and get them to call some of my other CEOs that I'm on the board of or whatever, so they can get a feeling. But if they get that, they've got that in their mind for some reason or other, and maybe that they they've heard about it from a friend of theirs or seen it from a family member or something. I don't know where they get it from, but I found for the most part, I've never been able to convince anybody otherwise. I haven't run into it very, very often either. I think certainly most of the companies that we see as angel investors come through the Regional Innovation Center network, and so they're prepared for it for the most part already by the RICs. They school them on this kind of stuff, so it's not usually a problem.
Which is good. We were going through this with a company right now, and they had the same similar comment, was that I need to save room for when the VCs come in, and the VCs are probably still another 2 years away, hopefully sooner, but let's just say that it's 2 years away. That's a lot of time for you to be working on other elements of your business and to be getting input and insight and being able to feed that out. So they're now into that consideration of, I never thought of it that way, or I didn't want to create this. I think maybe there's some pushback at thinking that it's creating more work. But I think to your point, if they're not willing to create a board, then you should almost be not willing to invest, because I think that there is a lot more things that we may not know about under the covers that we're not learning. And if they're not willing to open up Pandora's box at the beginning, then I think that there could be a bigger problem that is lying underneath that. And not that I want to imagine that's the case, but I do think that if you're trying to be open-ended to make an investment, you really got to open up all aspects of your business to the angel investors, into that community.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to think. Entrepreneurs got to think of their board as partners. They've got to look at them as people that they can call on for help at any time, and are there working with them towards the same goal: build a fantastic company. And
I love it.
So,
is there some metrics or some structure that you like to see being put into a board when you're setting one up with a company?
Well, from a structure standpoint, you want to have regular board meetings and properly manip them and that sort of thing. In terms of metrics, the metrics are dependent on the business. If you're in med tech, it's different metrics than you're in a SaaS place. So it's the metrics of the business, and the metrics change depending on the stage that the business is in. Early stage, cost of acquisition, you can't calculate that. Lifetime value, you can't calculate that. You can calculate it, but it's not very meaningful because it changes every time you get a customer. So there's just simple metrics at the start, and then it gets a little more complex as you become more mature. And but they're all pretty standard for depending on the business that the industry that a company's in.
And do you put any recommendations on boards for, is it like 3-year earnouts? Is there a percentage that you're willing to give up as a founder in the company? Do you want to make sure that you have insurance for the board? Any types of things like that you can share?
Well, sure. There definitely should be director's insurance, without a doubt. My view is that investors should not be compensated for their board work. So no shares. If you're working on a board and you're not an investor, then yes, you should get some options as opposed to shares, some options. And that varies depending on how much time and effort you're going to put in, into the company. So,
I love it. Now, there was a couple of pieces that I think that I wanted to dive in that you could share some insight on, and this goes into the investor information rights.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I think the audience would be probably, let's just say that their understanding of this key point is huge. So they should learn a little bit more about this. So maybe you can walk us through a little bit of this.
Well, it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. Certainly when I've led a deal or any G10 investor has led a deal, we negotiate investor information rights as part of that deal. And that includes quarterly reports, financial statements at the end of the year, that sort of thing. And often what I see happen, very, very often, as soon as the first VC comes in, they squash those information rights, or they restrict them to just what they call majority holders, and that's holders of 5% or more of the company, which means them and the other VC that's beside them, and the founders, who of course already have full access to information, and leaves out all of the early investors who took the highest amount of risk. So the VCs are riding on our shoulders, the ones that have borne the significant amount of risk. The founders obviously take more risk than we do, particularly if they put some money in. But I've never been able to get a VC to explain to me, give me a valid reason why other investors should not get the same information rights that they have, and continue to have information rights right till the exit, to the final exit. And they always come up with some kind of reason that it's something like, oh, they're going to give the information to a competitor. Well, I've never heard of that. I've never seen it. Why would you do that? You're just damaging your own investment. It just doesn't make sense whatsoever. Some founders I know will say, well, then they'll have questions, and that'll waste my time. Well, it won't waste your time, because if you need help in a particular situation, let's say you're getting a little tight on money, you're talking to VCs or the next round of investment, but it's a couple of months away and you need a bit of a bridge. The ones to give you the bridge are current investors. Well, if you haven't kept me up to date with how the company's doing and have withheld information from me, then I'm not going to write you a check to give you a bridge to get through to the next round of investment, because I don't know anything about the company, other than what I learned when I first did my first due diligence back when I invested a year or 2 years ago, or whatever the heck it is. So anyway, it's from my perspective, one of the reasons this happens is that companies, particularly the first time they get a VC as an investor, they're excited about it, and it's kind of, this professional investor, and they, of course, they bring the terms, bring the paper. They usually bring all the documents to, and they say, I want, no information rights for these guys, and I want this and that, da 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 da. And they just kind of bow down and think that this is the way it's supposed to always is, and the way it's supposed to be. And they don't realize that they have a fiduciary responsibility to all of the shareholders. And one of the reasons this happens too is that they often go off and negotiate this deal. And of course, the boards are at fault here. They let them negotiate the deal with their lawyer, who also doesn't have any stake in the game. So they don't really care whether the company gives up information rights for early stage investors either. So the result is the board effectively abrogates their responsibilities to look out for other shareholders. So it sounds like a small thing, but I know it sticks in the craw of angel investors, and you've probably seen it before too, where you've been cut out of information rights, and it's sometimes you've got a founder where you can pick up the phone and call them, and they'll give you an update, but that takes more time than if they just send out a quarterly report or gave an update. I've got one of my investments. I think their last round of financing was a Series D. Okay, so hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. And the CEO of that company religiously every quarter conducts an investor update meeting within a week of the board meeting, and he uses virtually the whole deck from the board meeting to give us our update. All the bad news, all the good news, and all the financial stuff, everything else. He's got no concerns whatsoever that we're going to do anything stupid with the information or whatever. It takes him an hour to go through it. And at the end, at the last one, which was a couple of weeks ago, he said, by the way, our business is kicking back in, coming out of COVID, really taken off. And so I'm looking for more customers, and they look like this. And if you have any contacts, connect them directly with me. And people are tripping over themselves to give him connections because he's kept them up to date over the years. So it's worth doing. So that you can get not only additional financing from existing investors if you need it, a bridge or otherwise, or participate in a round and just fill out a round or whatever. But it's also if you want to get regular leads and that sort of thing. Companies pivot, companies change their target market and everything else. If you don't keep your existing shareholders up to date in terms of where you're going, what your target market is, what your ideal customer profile is, then they won't be able to make connections for you. And every time you tell them what it is and update them on things, they're thinking about your business. I know virtually every time I go through one of those updates for this company, I usually, connect, that company with someone else, one of my other companies or someone else, because the thought's, high on my mind.
That's a brilliant story. And I think I'm going to reference this now every time I have a discussion with a startup, because it really does make a big impact. And we follow the same suit. We do a full deep dive in every company every quarter just to update where they're at and what they're doing. And I think it's something that if you start the pattern early, it continues to fold all the way through. And if you don't, then you'll find an excuse not to do it. And I find that to the exact reason that you just shared is that when that information is being pushed out on a regular basis, or even if it's chunked out in little tidbits of information flowing, that's what's going to keep your early, mid, and late investors continuously in the loop, but also feeding them to want to go and do more help. And it's like you said, that once you're tied into something, you want to keep driving and helping where you can. And all of those little progressive updates make a big difference for that investor. I know I can tell you a million stories of people that have complained all the time how they can't get a hold of the startup they invested in 10 years ago, 4 years ago, 1 year ago. And I think that, those are all normal pain points, but they shouldn't be normalized. It should be enough of a quick dissemination of information that everybody can stay behind what they invested in and still have that drive to talk some good things about them. And I think it starts by the founder being aggressively sharing what they know. And hopefully at that point, some new information might come out that benefits them at the same time. If an investor catches something, that they can always share it back to.
Yeah. You mentioned tidbits. That's reminds me of something that I always counsel all of my companies, including ones that I'm not on the board of, to do. And it's what I call the drip method of sending information out. As soon as you have some key news, whether it's a new customer, you lost a customer, you lost your director of client success, send that news out to investors. Don't wait to do a 4-page treatise on what's happened in the past quarter either, because a 25-word quick update will get read. It gets you back top of mind and keeps everybody informed and engaged. I just sent out an update for a company, a new company that I'm working on the board of, and I just sent an update out to investors. The company's a month and a half old, and I said we're in a financing round. If you know, we're actually presenting to Equation Angels in June, mid-June, and I said, if you know any investors that are part of the Equation Angels group or any other investors that might be interested, please connect them with me. I got one connection within 4 hours of sending that notice out. So I get a $25,000 check from out of that. It was well worth the half hour that I put into drafting that update. So
exactly. No, that's awesome. And now to take that, I guess, one step further, there's a few other key pieces that outside of that drip and keeping people really informed of what's going on in your business, there's a couple other things. One of them is preempted rights. Can you share a little bit about what preempted rights mean and why you want them or why you don't want them? And how does that work in the early stage world?
Well, certainly, GTAN, when we invest in a company the first time, we'll negotiate what are called preemptive rights, which means that we get to participate in the next round of financing on a pro rata basis. In the ideal world, an investor has enough capital to be able to invest in multiple rounds and maintain the percentage ownership that you own in a company. If it's a good company, you want to do that. You see VCs doing that all the time. Every time you see an announcement of investment round in company X, it may be led by a new VC, but all of the previous VCs have all written a check to maintain their ownership position because they really truly believe in the company and want to go forward. So this is something that angel groups and angel investors typically will put in the agreement. Then the VCs come along and they squash it along with the information rights and retract that and just restrict it to the majority shareholders. Majority holders, as they're called, and they're 5% owners or whatever. You can maybe negotiate them down from that, but in my view, this is totally wrong as well. And the reasoning for this is also bogus from my standpoint. It's going to slow us down in doing a financing. Well, I don't know about you, JP, but I've never seen any financing with VCs that's been able to be from the point of a term sheet to final paper and checks and money passing hands. I've never seen it take less than 45 days. And it maybe has in the odd occasion, but generally it takes 45 days or more. And generally you don't need to make it happen that fast either. If companies running out of money, then they need a bridge round. If they're that close to being out of money, then they need a bit of a bridge round anyway to get through until they can properly close the deal and not rush the negotiation of the terms. And so, what has to happen? There's generally a 10-day period prescribed that shareholders have to be notified and asked whether they want to exercise their right to purchase, their pro rata shares. And then if they don't respond, that's a no, and away the company goes. And some do, and some don't. My observation is that most angel investors don't participate in follow-on rounds, when in fact I think they should. Most of the companies that I see that do this, an awful lot of them are good companies and definitely worth an additional investment in, and effectively you're investing in a company that's lower risk than the initial company you invested in, or when you initially invested in the company. So it makes a good sense to do a follow-on round if and when you can. And I've tried to do that with a number of my companies. I've wondered, a few of them I've followed on 4 or 5 times, and and it's been worth my while to do that. The key reason I think that VCs negotiate this is they want to keep all the future shares for themselves. Just honest, pure, outright greed from my standpoint. And again, I don't think that that's fair to the early stage investors who have taken on the largest part of the risk in getting this company going. They should be rewarded and encouraged to follow on and continue to invest in the company. So another one of my pet peeves, and I haven't come up with a good solution to it, but it's on my to-do list to get together with my favorite lawyer and buy him dinner and conspire in terms of what we can write into a shareholders agreement that will last the revision of a shareholders agreement once a VC gets a hold of it. So that early stage investors do get preemptive rights and continue to hold preemptive rights going forward.
Well, it's interesting to say that it is so common, and I think a lot of it is control factors. The VCs want to ensure that they are controlling anything that's going out and anything that's coming in, and you're right, it's around information rights, it's around governance. There's so many things that I think that they look at it as, if too much information gets out and that means you can make more money, I don't think I agree with that. I need to choke everything and disbelieve that you brought any value to where we are today, and that all the value is going to come from us. And if we can control that and ensure that we've put enough process in here, then this startup is going to survive. And I think that duration of 45 days, you're right, is probably the fastest ever that would be investment in that time period. But I do think that a lot of VCs will extend the runway as long as they possibly can, because I think they look at most companies that when they're looking for funds, when they're really depleted of funds, that the control falls back on them. So the longer that they drag it out, the better opportunity of reducing the value to get them to agree to a lesser investment for more equity. And it's unfortunate, but it goes back to that whole when you should be investing, and you should always be getting investors 6 to 8 months before you need the money, because however long it goes through the process is that you want to be, as a startup, in control of your destiny versus putting it in the hands of others that are pushing you into the direction that they feel that you should fit. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure angels carry a really strong moral ground when it comes to helping these companies survive to get to that. And don't get me wrong, we all believe that VCs and larger investment opportunities are needed, and they're there for a reason. But it is allowing the owners to have a little bit more understanding and being able to balance out the benefits of everybody that have come into the company at any stage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure.
It's fascinating. And I guess that's something that we could probably really talk a lot more on. Maybe in another interview, we'll get into that, but there really is a lot of pieces that really have two groups of investment community really separated. Yeah. And it's unfortunate.
And I think just the one last point I'll make here for the companies out there that might listen to this or be listening, involve your boards. Make sure that your investor representatives at the board table are involved in the negotiations and help you go through the negotiations. For the most part, you have not, these entrepreneurs have not gone through negotiations with a venture capitalist. A lot of angel investors have. I've seen it with my companies, countless number of rounds of investment with venture capitalists. So I've seen a number of these deals, and most board members have. So get them to help you, okay? And don't count on your lawyer to do everything for you either. So because they'll sometimes take the common path, so to speak, as opposed to make sure that they're looking out for all of your stakeholders.
Agreed. I love it. Well, thank you, Steve, for kind of diving into a lot of those pieces of contracts and governance. I think it makes a huge value proposition for the startups to better understand that whole aspect of when they are raising and what the next investment periods are going to look like and how to protect themselves. We're going to jump now into our rapid fire questions before we get into the final personal questions. So rapid fire, are we ready?
Yep.
All right.
As ready as I'll ever be.
I like it. What is your favorite part of investing?
The people that I invest with, and working with young people that just keep me young.
Awesome. How many companies do you invest in per year?
That I can't give you a number. I can give you an average number. Probably, let's see, 2 to 3 would be the average. But my name is Steve Gilpin, and I have a problem. I'm a binge investor. So I went hard and fast for 3, 4, 5 years, and then have laid off and sat on my checkbook for a long time, other than supporting my existing companies. So I've had a couple of exits and just waiting for 1 or 2 more before I start writing some new checks.
I love it. That's a great average. And it's almost like saying that you're addictive, but that's what we like. People that are heavily passionate of helping early stage companies.
Yeah.
Are there any verticals you like to focus on?
Still enterprise software, SaaS plays, but I say I've got outliers in med tech and boutique real estate and winery and that sort of thing. So it's kind of it's partly a function of my friends and co-investors that might have something that looks good to them that they kind of drag me along.
I love it.
So, yeah.
Anything that you look for when it comes to due diligence that you really emphasize that you need to have to make a commitment?
Well, it's probably pretty standard for experienced investors. It's got to be a great idea, or at least my view. It's got to be a great idea. I might not be the best judge all the time, but to me, it's got to sound like a great idea. It's got to look like there's a really sizable market for that idea. And then the deal breaker is the founder and the leader or the leadership team. They've got to be extremely passionate and very, very coachable for me to invest. So it could be a great idea and a great market. If they're not the right team, then I'll back away. You can have a B idea and an A team, and that will be a very successful company. But if you've got an A idea and a B team, then potentially it's not going to work.
I'm a 1,000 times supporter of that last line. Actually, all of what you said, but including that last line. Okay, on the investment side, is there anything else that you look for when it comes to outside of the team or outside of the CEO? You gave the 3 things from marketing, ideation, and founders. Is there anything else that really kind of drops in there that says, you know what, if they don't have this, I'm out?
Well, the terms of the deal matter to me. If I have my druthers, it's an equity deal.
Okay.
I'm really not a big fan at all of CDs. For the most part, I have to pay tax on money I don't get. The interest, the company has to report the interest to CRA and send out T5s, and so I have to pay tax on that money. And you don't send me the money, so therefore I'm paying tax with money I don't have. And then it's going to turn out to be, that money gets rolled into shares at some point in time, maybe. In the number of CDs that I've invested in, I would say probably half of them have converted in the term or under the term, and a number have gone beyond the term, and you've got no no opportunity to do anything. There may be terms within the deal that says you can call the loan and say, okay, I want my money back. You're not going to convert it to equity. I want my money back, but the company doesn't have any money to pay it back. So it's a moot point. So I'm not a big fan of CDs. On the occasion, I'll bite my tongue and invest in a CD if I think it's a great team, great idea, great market. I'll swallow my pride or whatever. But and then safes, I don't. If it's a safe, I just walk away. Even the guy, as you know, the guy who invented safes is the worst thing he's ever done in his entire life. So, so they're not a good instrument. I don't understand why investors even contemplate them. So.
Well, there was a stat that said only 3%, I think, of all investments are done on safes, but the world all pushes them. I think a safe is good early on, just to start off. If you've got nothing, it's a cheap format to get your business going. Mm-hmm. But you're right. After that, things have to change. You have to kind of mature up and get into a better position, because there's not a lot of information that needs to be shared, and there's not a lot of ownership given back to the investor. So it's kind of like throwing your money into a big pot and hoping that the right person grabbed it and that you're going to get some information back on what it was used for.
Yeah. If one of my successful founders that had already given me a great exit came to me with a safe to invest in a new company that's doing, I'd write a check, and he wouldn't have to talk to me for more than 2 minutes, and I'd write a check on a safe. But that's a different situation than somebody that I've never met before and done business with.
Agreed. Well, you did mention that you like to do follow-on investments, so that's awesome. And you mentioned that you like taking board seats, and is that still the case?
Yes, it is. Yep. Although most of my company is a little more mature, and I've handed the baton off to in a few of those cases. So.
Fair enough. Last question. Do you like to lead rounds?
I don't mind leading rounds. It's hard work, as you know. But if people like you and I don't step up, and other investors don't step and lead rounds, then there won't be any rounds. I've seen rounds in good companies fall apart because there wasn't a lead in place. And it's not rounds that I was involved in, even interested in, but I've observed them from afar. And, a bunch of people put up their hands, 10, 15 people put up their hands, and the deal just kind of goes sideways because there's nobody that has stepped up and taken the lead. And so investors out there have to do their share in making this whole thing work, and that means that you've got to lead sometimes. So you don't have to lead every deal, but if in GTAN we had, when I went through most of my deals, there were probably half a dozen of us that were very, very active leads. So we might lead 2 or 3 deals a year. So I'd invest in a deal that you're leading, and you'd invest in a deal that I'm leading, and I did. A couple of times, 2 or 3 investments all at the same time, but I led one and a couple of friends led others. And so it works, right? So you just depend on your friends to take care of all the heavy lifting on the other deals.
Completely agree with that. And it is so helpful because there's a lot of deals, and you need some good people to support each one of them. If not, they fall through the cracks, and then they become wasted time, and the investors never go through because they're not doing this full time. They're not spending their time trying to deep dive into companies. They just want to participate, and they need someone to kind of hold the pot open for them, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. Now we're going to get into a couple of personal questions.
Okay, fire away.
All right. Favorite sports team?
Oh, probably Toronto Raptors.
Ooh, they're a good team. I like that. All right. Well, they weren't so good this year, but they have been pretty good in the past. All right. Favorite movie, and what character would you play?
You know what? I don't have a favorite movie. I think the last time I watched a movie was probably 5 or 6 years ago. So I couldn't even answer that question, JP.
All right. How about favorite Netflix show?
Don't watch Netflix either.
My God, Steve, it's amazing. Through COVID, I have become a Netflix watcher. Before that, I was like documentary king. And now I'm like, these shows are actually creative. So I've actually got into that. But I hear where you're coming from. Totally.
I spend a lot of time just working and doing research on, various investment things and that sort of thing. And I do watch other sports, but that's kind of my TV goes towards mostly sports stuff.
I love it. I love it. All right. What is your superpower?
What is my superpower? Oh, geez. I'm not sure I have one. No, I can't answer that. I've never.
I'll give you some scenarios. The one that I like the most, and again, this is probably about my learning from working with you as well. I think you have a great analytical mind, so you can see the touch points coming in, and that's probably due to marketing and working with companies a lot. But I think you kind of envision where this has got to go, and you're putting those two and 3 points together. So I think that becomes pretty valuable. I don't know if it's your superpower, but I found that. And I think also your calmness. So you're able to take all this information and still be able to bring out a direction or get people questioning things and understanding where they're going, at least the investors.
Well, thank you for that. I might rephrase that to say that I listen.
That's the word.
Okay.
Yes.
I listen, and a lot of people form opinions fairly quickly, and they're brighter than I am. I tend to listen and think it through, and then try to form or express a fully formed opinion as opposed to just throwing an idea out there. So
I love it. Well, I'm glad we were able to help find your superpower then. So that's good.
Thanks, JP. I'll have to get the T-shirt.
I like it. Well, there's one last question, and this actually came up because I was interviewing an investor from India, and then he asked me the question, and I said, you know what, I'm going to use that going forward because I like it. And he said, what is the secret sauce to investing for you? So I'm going to ask you, what is the secret sauce for you for investing? What's the one thing that just always, if you've got that, you're like, this is great. Even if you don't invest, that's great. It's the secret sauce to make you convert you into wanting to invest.
It's the people connection with the founder. And they don't all have to be the same. They aren't all the same. But if I can connect with them on a one-to-one basis, around the business and outside the business, then that's the secret sauce for me. It means that we'll have good communication and be able to work together and hopefully do some great things together.
Well, it's no longer a secret sauce anymore, but thank you very much for sharing that. And I do agree. It's that connection makes a big difference.
Thanks.
So we're going to wrap it up today. Thank you, Steve, so much for sharing all that insight. I always say I'm not going to take notes, but I can't help it. I just right away, I learned a ton. I'm a big fan. Thank you very much for everything. The way we like to end our podcast is that I like to give you the last word, which is for you to share anything that you want to share to the startup community or to investors. I turn it over to you. Again, thank you for all your time today, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Well, geez, JP, I think I've probably said everything that I really want to say to that. So I'll probably just reiterate a couple of key points, which is that communicate with your investors, over communicate with your investors. It will pay dividends. And along with the communication, make sure you ask them for things that that they can provide for you, whether it's connections to prospective customers, connections to potential employees, that sort of thing. So communicate regularly, and then protect their rights going forward as you go up the investment scale to venture capitalists and larger venture capitalists.
I love it. You're a good man. Thank you very much again, Steve. Okay, that was great. I've had the pleasure of working with Steve for the better part of the last 5 years for the G10 side of things. And you know what? Just to reiterate, communicate. Always key when it comes to working with other angel investors, bringing people into your business. And I love the other one too, about protecting your investors, trying to find ways to make sure that as you build and grow your business, that you're building the right board and you're protecting everybody that comes into it. And from outside of that, some other advice that he provided that I thought was pretty bang on too as well is, you know what, have a great idea, learn how to market it, and make sure you've got a great team supporting you. These are the de-risking factors for your business. Outside of that, it was great chatting with Steve. And if you guys can like, share, comment, we look forward to hearing back from you. Have a great day, and thanks for joining us.